There is a moment near the end of John's Gospel that almost everyone reads the same way, and almost everyone reads a little smaller than it was written. It is finished. In English, those words land like an ending. A man at the end of his strength. The suffering is over. The breath is gone. Nothing is left. That is what the phrase has come to feel like in our language. But the feeling English gives you is not the same thing the text actually says, because John did not record 3 English words. He recorded 1. A single Greek word, and the meaning our language reaches for is not the meaning that one word carries. Nothing was changed, and nothing is missing. The fuller sense is still sitting in the text, 2 breaths from where most people stop reading. His last breath was never a goodbye. It was a verdict. Before we can hear the word correctly, we have to deal with the scene around it, because the scene is the first thing that makes us mishear it. By the time we reach this verse, the hardest hours are behind him. The voices that mocked him in the morning have gone quiet. The light has thinned, and the people near the cross are doing what people do at a deathbed. They are waiting for the end. John even gives us a small, ordinary detail right before the word. He tells us Jesus said, "I thirst," and that someone lifted a sponge soaked in sour wine to his lips on a stalk of hyssop, a quiet, almost domestic act in the middle of an execution. And then he speaks, and John sets down that final word as the last thing he says before he bows his head. So everything in the setting trains your ear toward one conclusion. This is the bottom of the story. This is where it runs out. And that is the trap, because the scene only does half the work of making us mishear him. The English phrase itself does the other half, and it does it even more powerfully than the scene. Look at what our language does with the phrase. It is finished. Every word in it, in English, leans toward closing, finished. We say it when the meal is eaten, when the work is over, when the day is done. We say it at funerals. We say it when something has run its course and there is nothing left to do. So we hear a man at the very end of his strength, and we lower our voice because the words feel like a door swinging shut. And that reading is not foolish. It is simply what these 3 English words have come to mean to us. We carry that weight to the cross and assume the meaning underneath it matches. And this is not a small assumption we make once and move past. It is wired in. We have heard these words read in hushed rooms, at the lowest and heaviest point of the story, in a tone reserved for endings. So the verse does not arrive to us neutral. It arrives preloaded, already dressed as a final breath before we have looked at a single word of it. That is how strong the pull is, and it is exactly why it takes the original word to break it. But here is the quiet problem underneath all of it. Jesus did not speak English, and John did not write 3 words. He wrote 1, a Greek word, with its own history, its own range, and its own grammar. And that single word is where everything we assume begins to come apart. So let's go to the word John actually wrote, because it is one word doing the work of our 3. The Greek is tetelestai, and the place to begin is its root, because the root sets the direction of everything that follows. This word does not come from the idea of stopping, it comes from the idea of reaching a goal. The root points to the moment a thing arrives at the end it was aimed at all along. A task carried through to its purpose, a road walked the whole way to its destination. Picture a craftsman who finally sets down his tools, not because he is exhausted, but because the piece has become exactly what he intended. That is the world this word lives in. Arrival, not collapse. Completion, not surrender. You can feel that same idea in the noun this word is built on. It does not mean an edge where something simply quits. It means a goal, an aim, the point a thing was always moving toward. Think of a finish line. A finish line is not where a runner runs out of road. It is the exact place the whole race was pointed at from the first step. That is the shape of this word. An end that is a destination, not a breakdown. And this was a choice. Greek was not a poor language. If the point were simply that something stopped, John had ways to express that, but he wrote the word that points to something brought to its intended end. So the direction is already set. This is the language of completion, but direction alone is not the proof. The force does not become unavoidable until you see the tense. Here's the part English almost never shows you, and it is the real key. It's not only which word stands here, it is the tense the word stands in. Greek has a tense at this exact point that English does not really have, and because we do not have it, our translations quietly compress it into something smaller. In English, we mostly think in simple time. It happened, it is happening, it will happen. So we file it as finished under the past, something that occurred and is now behind us. But the Greek tense here does something our past tense cannot do inside a single word. It describes an action completed in the past whose result keeps standing, fully in force, into the present. Make it concrete. Think of the difference between the door was shut and the door stands shut. The first only tells you a shutting happened once. The second tells you it happened and it is still true right now. Or, think of how we say a thing is written. We do not mean someone is mid-sentence, and we do not mean it was scratched out. We mean it was written, and it still holds, settled, on the record. That standing result is the weight of this tense. And that is why this tense fits a declaration so naturally. A simple past tense reports something and lets it slip into the distance. This tense plants a flag and leaves it standing. It is the grammar of a thing settled on purpose and meant to hold, which is exactly why it matters that this is the tense. The final word is carried in. It is not reporting that something stopped. It is announcing that something is and remains done. So now we have both halves, a word that means a goal reached, and a tense that means the result still stands. Put them together, and the question changes. It is no longer about what the English feels like. It is about what this statement in this word and this tense actually meant. So here is what the text is actually carrying. Not my life is ending, not I cannot go on, something far closer to this. It has been accomplished, and it stands accomplished. A work brought all the way to its goal and still in force, settled, whole, on the record. And notice what that does to the moment. The English handed us a man having something happen to him. The word John recorded gives us a man announcing that something has been brought to its end. The text is not telling you his life is being finished. It is telling you that something has been finished and that it stays that way. But this is exactly the moment an honest reader should stop and push back. That is a great deal of meaning to pull out of one word. If you are feeling that, you are right to. So before we go any further, that objection deserves a straight answer. Here is the pushback, stated as strongly as it can be. Isn't finished simply a good translation? Translators are careful people. If the word carried all of that, why do almost all of our English Bibles just say it is finished? And aren't you pouring a whole sermon into one dying word? And the honest answer is this: finished is not a wrong translation. It is a thin one. English forces a choice. We do not have one common word that means completed and still in force right now, so the translator reaches for the nearest plain word we do have, and finished is a fair pick. Nothing was betrayed. The meaning was simply compressed, the way meaning is always compressed when it crosses from one language into another. And the second half of the objection answers itself, because the meaning does not rest on me telling you what the word can hold. It does not even rest on a lexicon. It rests on John. Because we are not the first to use this exact word in this exact scene. John is. And what he does with it, 2 verses earlier, settles the question on its own. Go back 2 verses to John 19:28. This is before the final word is ever reached. Here John is the narrator, describing the scene in his own voice. And John writes that Jesus, knowing that all things were now, and here is the word, accomplished. All things were now, tetelestai. It is the same word John will record in the final sentence, 2 verses later. See what that does, because it is decisive. Before the famous line is ever reached, John has already told us, in plain narration, what this word means in this scene. He uses it to say everything has been brought to completion, not that a life has run out, that the work, all of it, has reached its goal. So when that same word lands in the final sentence, it is not introducing a new idea, it is confirming the one John already gave us. And do not miss who is speaking in that earlier verse. It is John himself, stepping back to tell us what the whole scene amounts to. This is his own summary of everything Jesus came to do, and he reaches for this one word to carry all of it. So John has handed us the key before we ever reach the lock. He tells us what the word means in his own voice and only then lets it fall in the final line. By the time we read that line, we have already been told exactly how to hear it. This is why it is solid ground and not a clever theory. We are not importing a private meaning. We are letting John interpret John. The narrator uses the word, and the same word stands in the final sentence 2 verses later. One author, one meaning. The text closes the case on itself with no help from us at all. And once you have seen it there, the verse can never shrink back to a last gasp. But there is a second, quieter strand of evidence worth knowing from outside the Bible entirely. It is real, and it is striking. It also has to be handled with care, so it strengthens the case instead of overstating it. Out in the ordinary Greek of that world, the everyday records people kept, forms from this same word family, turn up in a very practical way. Scholars who studied those documents have noted language from this family appearing on accounts and receipts, where it could carry a simple final sense, a settled account, paid in full, nothing further owed. You can hear that same settled sense inside Scripture too. This word's family is used for paying what is owed, for settling the tax, for handing over what is due. So it could carry the picture of an account brought all the way down to zero, a debt not merely acknowledged, but discharged and closed. Picture what that could mean for an ordinary person. A bill paid, a tax cleared, a debt that had hung over a household for years, brought down to nothing. And on the record, language from this same family marking the matter closed. Not something paused, and not something partly handled, but something fully settled, with no balance remaining and no further claim left to answer. That was the kind of weight words from this family could carry in ordinary life. The word you were relieved to see on a debt you owed. Now, here is the care it needs. I am not going to put a ledger in his hands or build a scene the text never describes. This is supporting evidence, not the foundation. The foundation is what John already showed us. But it is worth knowing that the word in this verse belongs to a family people used in ordinary life for a debt paid to the last coin. So even the most cautious reading is still enormous. Whatever was being done here was not stopped. It was finished, with nothing left to add. Which raises one last honest question. If the word is this full, why does our English Bible still sound so thin? And the answer matters, because it is not the answer people usually reach for. This is not a conspiracy. Nothing was hidden from you. Nothing was deleted from the text. No one sat in a room and decided to bury the meaning. The fuller sense is sitting right there in the Greek, exactly where it has always been, open to anyone who looks. What changed was not the text. It was the English word finished, in our own language, across a long stretch of time. Words drift. And over the centuries, finished drifted toward endings, toward things running down and breaking off. So by the time it reaches your ear, it mostly means over. That is why we read the verse as a closing. Not because a translator betrayed us, and not because of anything decided in some ancient council. It happens slowly, in the ordinary way one word shifts under your feet across generations. And that is the quiet good news in all of it. If the meaning had truly been cut out, you would need someone to smuggle it back. But it was never cut out. It is still there, whole. You do not need a secret, and you do not need an expert. You need the word, and the verse 2 lines above it. And there is one last thing in the text that confirms the whole reading, in the very last motion John records. Watch the order John gives, because it tells you he was not overtaken. John writes that he bowed his head and then gave up his spirit. Notice the sequence. Normally, death takes a man first, and the head falls on its own afterward. Here it runs the other way. First he bows his head, the way you lower your head when something is being deliberately concluded, and then he releases his spirit. The dying does not happen to him and pull the word out of him. He speaks, he bows his head, he gives up his spirit. From start to finish, John records it as something he does, not something done to him, and that matches the word exactly. A man being destroyed does not announce that a work is complete and then calmly lay his own head down. A man finishing one does. So now we can go back to the cross and read the whole moment with the word restored. Put it all together. The scene told us to expect an ending. The English word leaned the same way. but the word John recorded means a goal reached. The tense means the result still stands. The narrator had already used that exact word 2 verses earlier to mean a finished and accomplished work, and the final motion shows a man acting, not a man collapsing. Every line of evidence points one direction, so this was never the sound of a man running out. It was the sound of a work brought to its goal and sealed there. And because of the tense, it does not expire when his breath does. It still stands. It cannot be repeated because it does not need to be. It cannot be undone because it is finished and remains finished. And that changes how the verse sits with you. A goodbye asks you to grieve something that has ended. A completed work asks you to rest in something that holds. The difference is not decoration. It is the whole weight of the line. If the word only meant an ending, you would be left at a graveside. Because it means a finished work still standing, you are left somewhere else entirely. In front of something done, and done for good, that asks nothing more from you. So the next time you reach those 3 small English words, let them carry what the one Greek word always carried. Not a door closing on a life, but a completed work that still holds. The same letters on the page, an entirely different weight. His last breath was never a goodbye. It was a verdict. And this is not the only place it happens. There is another sentence from that same cross, one we read as a man quietly letting go. When the words underneath it describe something deliberate and chosen, the careful placing of something precious into safe hands. English makes the act sound passive. The text says otherwise. That one is next. Tap the video on screen, and let's test what it actually says.